Hey everyone, it's Zach back with a new mortgage video. Hope you're all having a happy Tuesday. If this is your first time seeing one of my videos, welcome to my channel. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back, where I'll try to demystify all things mortgage related. If you find this content helpful, please like and subscribe. So with analysts like JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs dramatically raising their probability of a recession, I wanted to talk about how a recession would affect the housing market. I'll talk about historically what elements are usually present during a recession and what they lead to in terms of housing, what elements I think are here this time and which ones are maybe not, and how that I would expect would affect housing prices. First of all, quick definition, a recession is 2 or more quarters of negative GDP growth. These other things that I'm going to talk about are typically elements of a recession, but they are not by definition required for it to be considered a recession. So the 3 things that are typical are the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates, uptick in unemployment rate, and a decline in construction. So just based off that profile, what would that lead to in terms of housing? More unemployment would mean less people that could buy a house. The drop in interest rates will typically lead to better mortgage rates in the long run. Less housing starts leads to less supply down the road. So what's typically the case is that housing prices either stay flat or there have been times where they've gotten better after a recession. We had a very small recession at the beginning of COVID, and of course you saw this boom. Now the big exception to that is the 2008 Great Recession. And that was because that recession was caused by the housing market. There were all the elements of a housing bubble present. If you want a detailed analysis of why I think we're not in a housing bubble, I did a video on that. I'll put a link below, but that was an exception to the rule. Let's talk about where we're at right now. So currently the market is expecting the Fed to cut rates 3 to 5 times this year. Whether or not that actually happens, I think is really going to depend largely on inflation. I've talked about this before. The seesaw between consumer fear leading to less spending versus tariffs potentially raising prices, where does that play out in the long run? We're probably not going to know that for at least a couple months, but if we see higher inflation, the Fed is probably not going to cut rates at all, if not, definitely not 3 to 5 times. If we see a massive drop in consumer spending and that outweighing any inflationary effects of tariffs, and these companies have to lower their prices to match demand, then you could definitely see the Fed cutting rates 3 to 5 times or maybe even more. Unemployment rate is almost always going to be a result. Recession will almost always result in higher unemployment. The question is going to be how much. During recession, companies are much more likely to cut jobs, not want to hire until the economy is in a more stable place. And then construction, as I talked about in my video about why I don't think we're in a bubble right now, construction has gone down quite a bit already. One of the reasons I don't think we're going to see housing crash. If we get a recession, that's going to continue, absolutely. So ultimately, what does that mean in terms of the housing market, housing prices? I think the first point is really going to be a big influencer. If we see an uptick in inflation, even as the economy falls into a recession, that's going to be the worst case scenario really across the board, but especially for housing, because I don't think mortgage rates are going to get much better. And the past really 5 years, housing prices have been more tied to mortgage rates than ever before. So if we see a higher unemployment rate, less people buying houses, while mortgage rates either stay elevated or even rise, that's definitely going to have a negative effect. However, if we see mortgage rates come down, even with a rise in unemployment, I think you would see housing prices go up. And in any scenario, I would expect housing prices will go up in the future because of the decline in construction, which again, we've already started to see that. It would only continue more steeply if we got a recession. So if you have any questions, shoot them below or feel free to call, text, or email me. But thanks for tuning into this one, and I will see you next time.